Okay, so then there's one other thing that we could talk about. And this is this idea of to stretch a muscle or a group of muscles or not when something feels tight. When something feels tight, should we stretch or not? So I would love to hear what you guys say about this. I'll give you the exact position. So think about cow face pose. Okay, cow face pose, you know, your knees are stacked, right? So top knee, you're going to get the most resistance, right? When it's on top. When the other one's on top, that one's going to get the most resistance, like around the corner, right? Of the posterior hip, sacrum, that area. So if one side feels tighter than the other, first of all, let's talk about what's that an indication of?
Could be an indication of some kind of imbalance, either laterally or, yeah, probably laterally.
Yeah, there's an imbalance, 100%. Is that like highly unusual? No. No, that's the most normal thing in the world. Partly, why do we sometimes, let's talk about why we would have certain imbalances, especially lateral ones. Go ahead, Sarah.
For me, that's just an indication that we use our sides of our bodies differently in our lives, in our daily lives. Maybe you get out of bed by swinging that leg over somehow weirdly, or maybe you always take the step with that one leg leading or something like that.
Yeah, we have a dominant side usually.
Dominant side, exactly. Or different activities. Maybe you stand at the counter with that leg kind of cocked a little bit or back a little bit. That would be an indication for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else? Thanks, Sarah. Go ahead, Wendy.
Well, for me, it's even if I don't do that pose for a while, just, you know, if I'm, or just sitting a lot and not doing that extreme internal, or is it internal? Yeah.
Abductions, the
Abduction.
internal rotation.
Exactly, it's abduction. Yeah, I just
Adduction,
don't.
adduction, not abduction.
Right. I just don't do that on a daily basis. I mean, you know, we're usually doing an abduction somehow when we're reaching for something. Anyway, for me, it's also just lack of that movement. And then I feel stiff when I do that pose. It's like, oh, this pose again. It's not something I do weekly. I don't offer that. Or it's kind of, yeah, I don't do that pose on a regular basis.
Yeah, so you're just not greasing that groove. It's,
Right,
you know.
right, exactly. For me, that's probably more. And then when I hold it for a while, or yeah, it feels better. But initially, it's just, yeah, feeling a little sticky or.
Yeah, there could be stickiness. Anybody else? Go ahead, Bianca.
Well, a lot of postural and weird movement habits come to mind, but I think a lot of these things are postural. I recognize the more I work with my own body and, you know, have a look at what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and how I'm sitting, and there's always this leg going over the other. You know, we have these kinds of habits that the way we move, the way we sit, the way we position ourselves on different kinds of seats, and I found, like, I have this shoulder injury in the left side, so my left shoulder is higher, and then when I'm sitting on my desk, I kind of rotate a bit to the right, and then I lean into my high shoulder so I can write with my left hand, and, you know, things. I think everybody has this kind of stuff. I mean, it's good to notice. So I know that, okay, I'm doing it again and I'm rotating out of it, and sometimes even trying to, you know, use my body in the opposite direction, but I'm right-handed. So if I turn this way, I'm kind of out of the game.
Yeah.
Stuff like this, lots of things.
There's lots of things. And we all, number one, we have our handedness. So we're going to rotate to that side. And it's also the way our organs are located, you know, because we have the liver on the right side normally. Every now and then there'll be a human body, you know, that the organs are reversed, but generally, and you know, the liver's a massive organ, so it really takes up space and weight and all of that. So just so you're aware, like you don't, I want you all to know, like, that perfect symmetry is very unusual. Slight lateral deviations and rotations are very common. It's wonderful to be aware of it, so you don't, like, the more you default into your preferred twist or whatever, the deeper that groove gets, you know, basically a samskara. So, you know, you want to take breaks from it as often as you can, and make sure, like, you know, when you're out walking, you're erect and your arms are swinging equally. And, you know, like there's lots of things you can do to help unwind some of those really held patterns. And as Bianca said, you know, if you're writing, like I mean, I'm writing at my computer a lot. And it's just horrible for my body. You know, I know that, you know, I'm quite uncomfortable when I get up, because I lose consciousness of my body and I'm just in, you know, my brain and into the writing. So that's, you know, that's the reality. But, you know, I get up, I move, I walk, you know, 10,000 steps, and, you know, I move around and try to unwind and practice in such a way that I'm really noticing the differences from one side to another. And, you know, sometimes spending more time on one side than I would on another, just because, you know, I can tell that there's more resistance on that side. Now that kind of brings me to the actual thing I wanted to talk about. So, like, when you have these anomalies happening, you're noticing that one side is complaining. Okay, let's just say that, oh, you notice it's really tight in this one pose, but then when you're walking around or you're at your kitchen counter or whatever it is, you're noticing, okay, well, there's actually like some discomfort there. There might not be, but just say there is. Then, and whether there is or not, you still need to check. You still need to notice, like, do I like sink into one hip preferentially? Or, you know, what are the things that I do unconsciously and habitually? So just looking at that and just seeing if, okay, is that something I can change? Can I shift out of that? We just talked about that, so that's all good. But then, is there like some sense of instability somewhere? That's another thing to really look for. So if you've got an area that feels tight, it's very important not to just kind of judge that one area. That's not necessarily something where the root of the problem is that area. The root of the problem could be the opposite foot or something, you know? So you have to like think of it like, as tempting as it is to think of this particular tight muscle, try to put it in the context of the whole body and just notice whatever else is going on. Maybe there's some instability. It's often weakness, like on the opposite side or something like that. And so now you have one side that is trying to make up for the weakness over there by hanging on too tight over here. So there's often that kind of response in the body. So it's kind of up to each of us to, you know, figure out what's going on in our own body as best we can. But even while you're figuring that out, and, you know, this can take a while, there are things that you can do. So I would always default toward strengthening something. Even if something feels too tight, something somewhere is weak. I guarantee you, something somewhere is weak. It could be the feet. It could be the muscles that control the knees. It could be the opposite hip. It could be the muscles that would help neutralize the pelvis. So some of the superficial front line and deep front line muscles. So that could include your inseam muscles, pelvic floor, lower belly, you know, those structures. That could be partly resolved with pubic bone to breastbone awareness and activation, you know, so something like that. I'm just giving you all the connections. But still, just like in our previous in our previous little example that we worked through with the unstable SI joint, I would almost take the exact same approach here, interestingly. If you have muscles around one hip that feel like they're extra tight compared to the other side. So I would go into not focusing on the tight side, I would go into doing bilateral things and compare the sides. So doing both of them at the same time. So like bridges, okay, like good mornings, or even like wider leg postures where you really have to activate the glutes. So doing something like a good morning with the feet wider apart, dialing out. Things that would challenge your hamstrings. So things like konasana, you know, with hands on the floor behind you and your legs are straight and your torso is straight and you're digging your heels down and lifting into a sort of a plank, but you know, your belly's up. Okay. Yeah. So things like that, or even any kind of side plank or things like that. Just to notice, compare sides. Like, does one side feel weaker than the other? That's what we're looking for. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I see this a lot in my practice. Asymmetries is what I deal with first, and then stability, strength, mobility, that kind of thing. That formula always. Although I have a little bit of different take on it. I think that yeah, double leg's good, but also the staggered stance is also applicable here, as well as all the different stances. So you should, if something doesn't feel awesome, then you kind of rehab that one, you work on that move, but then you can train the other moves and load them more. So if your double leg stance is kind of the one that's weaker, you work on that weakness while you can train maybe the staggered stance if that's the stronger stance, or maybe it's the other way around. If your staggered stance, one leg is weaker, you work on that one or you rehab that one, and then you can train the squat or the deadlift or whatever double leg one.
Yeah. So I wasn't even into training yet. Like we would just create awareness, like whatever you can do. So 2 legs, single leg things, figure out which is the weaker side, looking for anomalies, compare.
Yes.
And then from there, that gives you the clue as to like, well, okay, which side do I need to spend the time on? You know, which side do I need to rehabilitate?
Which side or which position? Also,
and both.
I don't think it's just sided. I think it's positional as well.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So let's make sure there's clarity for the takeaway then. So often there is, if there's tightness somewhere, what do we do about it? Should we stretch it? Because I'm going to come back to that. Or should we try to figure out if there's some kind of postural habit that's, you know, different from side to side? Is there a weakness where that's showing up from side to side? Test it out in a number of postures. And once you kind of know what's going on because you gathered some information, then you can start, you know, prioritizing the positions you feel like you need to strengthen. I think is that a fairly clear way to say that? Prioritize the positions where you feel weak and you want to get stronger, where there's a difference, you know, from one side to the other, so you can catch up the weaker side. Go ahead, Jane.
I have a question. So is there ever a case for stretching the tighter side? I don't know if this is what you're trying to get to.
It is what I'm getting to. Yeah.
So for example, I have a structural issue in terms of a scoliosis in the lumbar spine. And my right side, my hip is higher, my shoulder is higher. And I often feel tight in the glutes, at the ankle, up the side of my calf, right into my shoulder and my neck, right up to the crown of my head. So like the whole right side.
So all one side. Okay.
all on one side, yeah. Especially around the lats at the moment, and it's kind of been going on probably for about 6 months. It's been quite bad actually. And traditionally, like I would have compensated with that hip. My left shoulder would have been higher, so there was kind of a across compensation going on. But again, over the last 6 months, it has been the right side. So even when I do that pose, or if I'm doing even like an activated child's pose, or a side bend, I feel like the muscles on the right side are sticky. They're not as fluid, they're not moving, they're not gliding. And it feels like I really need to stretch it. And stretching it, it feels good, obviously, but I'm a bit confused as to what I should do. Like even the right side of my butt is bulkier. So that gives me an impression that the muscles are bulkier. So therefore I'm guessing they're stronger. But it's causing pain. So I have been, and like my instinct was to stretch it. And since beginning this course, I'm going, okay, maybe it's all very weak. And obviously there's a bit of instability at the SI joint because there's a scoliosis. So it's a structural thing that I suppose I just have to work around.
I would really encourage you to let go of any of those names.
You'd encourage me to
let go of any of those names.
Okay.
Like scoliosis.
Names such as?
And like scoliosis. Yeah, just forget about it. Everybody has a little bit. You're fine.
Yeah.
You're perfect.
Yeah.
So let's just work on what you're feeling.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to come back to here, because you had a question for me, like, is it okay to stretch? So the thing is, if you want to create some kind of permanent change, you're going to need to give the body more information than you would be giving it if you just stretched it. So this is why I recommend activation at end range. So you would do something like standing moon pose. But you're very active, right? Because you're standing upright, you're getting taller the whole time, you're organizing and activating, you're using your breath to literally do almost like an active inhibition technique, so you're working with muscles, proprioceptors, fascia, full body awareness, things like that. If you're in like I would also recommend things like frisky pigeon pose for you, frisky pigeon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're lifting out of the pose.
Yes.
If you do cow face pose, you are doing the same thing you're doing in frisky pigeon. You're literally lifting your pelvis off the ground. You go up and down or try to lift it and hold it. So you're working like it with your tissues and your joints closer to like their end range, but you're active there. So, and you're mastering control of that position because you're being active and you're giving the nervous system lots of information. It's participating. So that's just a way of working with the body. Now, there is like, I do want to just say that in your case, if you're feeling the whole right side, that is the masculine side. So there might be things there for you to observe. Maybe there's ways that you can explore the feminine side a little bit more. Maybe. Just going to leave that with you. But in terms of like whether or not to stretch is appropriate, I would do activation at end range. And I would do these comparative things. And I would very strongly encourage you to do like Wendy noticed that she was sleeping in a certain way. Like, what's your sleeping position? Because, we're in a sleeping position for a very long time. It does change the tissues. So sleeping position, sitting position. I know you don't have a desk job and you're kind of up and around all day. So that's good for you. But maybe you're sort of over using one side of the body. And I know you have a very busy, demanding life. So maybe your masculine is trying to do it all.
Yeah.
Maybe your feminine needs to express herself a little more. I don't know. Don't share anything about that. I'm just saying things to think about. And then, in your practice, just see like what comes up for you. As we said, postural things, habitual movement things. And then is there like a weakness somewhere that my body is trying to make up for? And also like, we haven't talked about, for a while, but your body also has the trauma reflex. So if say in the past, you've sprained your ankle a few times on that side, or your knee, or you've had some hip injuries on that side or something, your body may have, a lot of held.
That actually happened. I sprained my ankle a few years ago, actually, on the right side. It just went in. And I didn't rehabilitate it properly. It kind of got better really quickly. And I suspect there's actually, I can nearly feel it kind of coming up through the body. So a weakness in the feet, the right side particularly. That's what my gut is telling me a little bit. But I do think that is definitely a factor. Yeah.
And, it's sort of like, this reminds me of what Sarah just said too. It's like, maybe, I don't know, Jane, there's no judgment here. I'm just putting out ideas, but like, I know for me, okay, I'll describe myself. There are definitely times in my life when I'm really busy and I'm a very determined, move forward kind of person. And if I sprained my ankle, I would be so upset. And I would be like, I don't have time for this. I'm going full steam ahead, So this is like forgetting what your body has just gone through. You know what I mean? And you're not dealing with that trauma and the response. And it's, you're not fully healing because that's still there. So there are like somatic practices that, we can do that unwind that. I guess right now is not the time to go into it, but if you're aware of Thomas Hanna's work, do you know about Hanna somatics? Okay. Well, that might be something you could look at doing that. I mean, that's very gentle. Basically, I mean, if you understand how that works, then I would definitely try a few of the exercises for the trauma reflex.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
Something. Yeah, because when I was going into talking about the activation at end range, if you're doing that in order to like force your body to go somewhere, that's still like it's the wrong like energy to bring to it, right? We want to let our body tell us what's going on as best as possible. So that's why the whole like awareness, noticing, comparing, do a body scan, that kind of thing is quite important, just so your body is a sacred vessel, it's literally holy. And, you don't want to force it somewhere where it's not ready to go. Wait for it to tell you, wait for it to show you, ask. That's really important. I mean, we have all kinds of tools, but if we're just applying them without listening, and then I don't think that's
absolutely
a good thing.
Yeah. And I absolutely accommodate that listening.
Excellent.
And my practice has been that way for quite a while. I suppose still the question remains, do you ever stretch?
I personally don't stretch.
You don't?
I don't, but it's fine. Like, I feel like my body is prepared to stretch. Like if I wanted to stretch, if I felt like that was, I don't know. If I felt like I wanted to do that, why would I want to do that? See, I just feel like there's other things that I would do. I would just automatically activate at end range.
Okay.
If I went into a position, and if I don't want to do that type of thing, I would just do mobilization, where I'm just sort of moving in and out of postures, like kind of flowing in and out of postures. I mean, the reason why I'm saying this is that I know a lot of people really enjoy stretching. They enjoy the sensation. And if you enjoy the sensation, go into it. I would not like prioritize stretching if I was not 100% sure that my joints and the tissues around them, including the nervous tissues, I would need to know that they were all, taken care of. They're robust. I've developed them. I have all the proprioceptive sensitivity I need there. Then sure, it's fine to stretch. I just value those things over any sensory experience that I would get from stretching, because I know like stretching just doesn't have the effect that strengthening and sensitizing fascia have. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very clear.
Because like once you like, there's a video. I mean, there's some of these supplementary videos in the course, which might go into this for you a little bit more if you like, where I just talk about like what's actually happening when you're stretching. Like, are you making muscles longer? Is that even possible? What are we doing? Where's the hot topics? Oh, you're not going to be there for a while. You could probably find that on YouTube though.
Okay.
But there's a few hot topics here. Yeah. Individual differences, so, we're talking about a little more specifically like connective tissue differences, and that does stretching make muscles longer? So you see, I kind of meet that one head on. Hypermobility versus hypomobility. So when you have like too much joint mobility versus not enough joint mobility. And why am I tight? This is kind of what we're talking about today. So, so that is coming, but if you want access now, I sure we can figure out a way to give it to you. So,
Okay, great. Thank
if
you.
you need that. Yeah. So, it is kind of a detailed conversation. I don't want to come off as being against stretching. If people like stretching, it's just that like, if that's all you do, you're not going to end up in a good place.
No.
That's really important to know. And, if you have been taking care of your joints, you're working with organization and activation, you're doing, isometrics, and you're doing nicely controlled isotonics, and you're using mechanical disadvantage and stuff like that. You're feeding your nervous system, you're taking care of your muscles and your fascia, then sure, stretching isn't going to be a bother. But if stretching is the main stimulus your body is getting, now you're going down a different road. And as people just don't realize that. They just think that stretching is totally innocuous. They think it's super gentle, but it's actually mechanically quite stressful on the tissues, especially the leveraged ones that we do in yoga, which, with say binds, or with, like in pigeon, where you're laying your body weight on your hip and knee joint, or cow face
Absolutely.
pose.
And I've wondered, since I started this, I've kind of wondered, has stretching or doing passive yoga, has that caused this? Or has it exasperated it?
Well, time will tell, because you're giving your body a new input. So
exactly.
there will be, several months of adjustment and adaptation happening, right? So, but in that time, just really paying attention. Sounds like you do. So just really, just noticing. Make sure you're doing lots of different variety in your postures. So you really get into the corners and stuff and see what's going on there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay, you bet. All right.